The Israeli Antiquities Authority uncovered the remains of a 1,500-year-old Byzantine church just outside of Jerusalem.
Wow, look at that! Oh, it's just coming to life. That's unbelievable. My brain is exploding right now.
It looks like it was written just a few hours ago.
It really does.
For 15 centuries, the mud along the shores of Galilee protected a secret that history was never meant to find. Scholars believed that every word Jesus ever spoke to his disciples had already been captured in ink, sealed inside the pages of the Bible, complete and unchanging. But that assumption may have been wrong. On the northern edge of the Sea of Galilee, archaeologists recently peeled away layers of water-soaked earth and uncovered something extraordinary, a silent mosaic floor, untouched since the time of the Byzantine Empire. Locked within its stones is a message, one preserved not in parchment but in tile. A direct command from Jesus to Peter, a command no gospel ever recorded. These words don't simply add a footnote to history, they challenge what we thought we knew. And if their meaning is fully understood, they could force a rethinking of the very foundations of the Christian faith. Beneath the thick slime of the shoreline, the legends refused to die. For generations, local fishermen had shared the same strange stories. During severe droughts, they said carved stones would briefly rise from the water. Some spoke in hushed voices about a massive structure buried deep in the mud, a great house lost to time. Eventually, a new team of archaeologists decided to take the risk and investigate. They weren't searching for treasure or gold. They were hunting for something far more elusive, a town mentioned in the Bible more than almost any other, yet one that had completely vanished from the map. The excavation began in the crushing heat of summer. The air was heavy with the stench of soaked earth and rotting vegetation. There was nothing glamorous about it. It was exhausting, relentless work. Pumps ran constantly to stop lake water from flooding the trenches. Every foot they dug, the water fought back as if the land itself was trying to protect a secret. For weeks, the skeptics seemed right. The team uncovered little more than endless mud, a few scattered pieces of Roman pottery, and a growing sense of disappointment. Morale was slipping. Then everything changed. A volunteer's trowel struck something solid, not the dull thump of packed soil, but a sharp, unmistakable clang. Metal on stone. The team stopped and began clearing the area by hand, gently scraping away layers of grey silt. First, a line appeared, then a corner, then a wall. This wasn't a random pile of stones. It was a structure, precise, deliberate, built with perfect 90-degree angles. As the excavation widened, its true scale became impossible to ignore. This was no fisherman's hut. It was enormous. The walls were thick, built to endure centuries. As they dug deeper, another detail emerged. The unmistakable curve of an apse, the semicircular space where an altar would stand in a church. But this was no ordinary church. Its design was grand, complex, and astonishingly ancient. And here's the part that stunned everyone. The structure stood exactly where ancient pilgrims had claimed the house of Peter once stood. For years, historians had dismissed those accounts. They called the pilgrims confused travelers, tourists who got lost. They insisted the real site was miles away, up on dry land. But the mud at El Araj was telling a very different story. As the team carefully washed away 15 centuries of grime, colour began to bloom beneath their hands. Reds, blues, yellows. A mosaic floor emerged, shockingly intact. The very mud everyone assumed would destroy the ruins had done the opposite. It had sealed them like a time capsule, protecting them from weather, looters, and even marching armies. Yet the greatest discovery wasn't the building itself. It was what lay woven into the geometric patterns of the floor. A message, a text. One that seemed to speak directly across time from the year 500 to those standing there now. Here's the unbelievable part. What they had uncovered so far was only the surface of the mystery. As the team continued cleaning the mosaic tiles, a realization set in. This church wasn't built on bare ground. It sat directly on top of something else, something far older. and that lower layer held the answer to a question that had haunted scholars for 2,000 years. From this point on, the discovery took a much darker turn. Capital of the Apostles. To understand why this mosaic is so important, you first need to understand its location. This wasn't Jerusalem. It wasn't Nazareth. This was Bethsaida. If you know the Bible, that name should sound familiar. Bethsaida was the hometown of Peter, Andrew, and Philip. It was where Jesus healed a blind man. It was where the feeding of the 5,000 took place. In many ways, it functioned as the operational center of the early apostolic movement. But Bethsaida is also known for something else, something unsettling. It was one of only 3 cities that Jesus openly cursed. In the Gospel of Matthew, Jesus condemns Bethsaida, saying, "Woe to you, rebuking the city for witnessing miracles, yet refusing to change its ways." He warned that it would be brought down to Hades, and history suggests that's exactly what happened. By the 4th century, Bethsaida had become a ghost town. It vanished from maps. Roman writers stopped mentioning it. It was as if the ground itself had swallowed the city whole. For nearly 2,000 years, no one could agree on where Bethsaida actually stood. 2 locations battled for the title. One was Et Tel, a rocky hilltop packed with impressive ruins, but far too distant from the water to make sense as a fishing village. The other was El Araj, the swampy shoreline where this excavation was taking place. The debate was intense. Entire academic careers were built around proving one site right and the other wrong. Then the church was discovered, and everything changed. When archaeologists dug beneath the Byzantine mosaic floor, they hit a layer of destruction. Beneath the church were Roman-era homes, and these weren't elite villas or administrative buildings. They were fishermen's houses. The team uncovered lead net weights, fishing hooks, and coins dating back to the 1st century. This was the evidence scholars had been waiting for. A fishing village, active during the exact years Jesus was alive. It was the smoking gun. But there was one more twist, one that made the discovery even more unsettling. The way this church was constructed tells a story, not of chance, but of obsession. The Byzantine builders didn't place the church randomly. They positioned it with extraordinary precision, centering the entire structure over the remains of one specific house. And that raises an obvious question. Why here? In the ancient world, you didn't erect a massive basilica over an ordinary fisherman's home unless that place carried deep significance. The architects of the 5th century went to remarkable lengths to protect this exact spot. They built a protective wall around the original room. They treated the dirt floor of the old house not as rubble, but as a sacred object. Every detail points to the same conclusion. The builders were completely convinced they were standing on the actual home of Peter. Skeptics might argue that the Byzantines were simply guessing. But ancient memory was far more reliable than we often assume. People didn't rely on maps or written records the way we do today. They relied on living memory. Grandfathers brought their grandsons to this place and told them, "This is where the rock of the church once lived." The discoveries at El Araj suggest something remarkable. Despite the curse, despite the city's disappearance, a small community of believers remained. They protected the location. They kept its identity secret. They passed the knowledge down, generation after generation. And when the empire finally became Christian, they did what they had been waiting centuries to do. They marked the site with a monument that would endure. But this monument wasn't built as a simple memorial. It was a vault. And inside that vault, its builders sealed a sentence meant to survive centuries, one that pulls us back to the moment Jesus spoke directly to his followers. This isn't straightforward, though, because what they embedded into the floor wasn't a verse you'll find in any Sunday school lesson. The stones were about to break their silence. The Byzantine Code. Let's return to the mosaic. As conservators carefully removed layers of dirt and decay, Greek letters began to emerge. The team gathered around, cameras flashing, hearts pounding. An expert in ancient Greek was called in immediately to translate the inscription on site. It opens with a formal dedication to a bishop, nothing unusual. But then the tone shifts. The text mentions Peter, and it doesn't refer to him casually. It calls him the chief and commander of the heavenly apostles. That phrase is explosive. In theology, language is never accidental. The specific Greek words used here carry immense weight. They imply rank, authority, a clear chain of command. They suggest that by the 5th century, right here in rural Galilee, Peter was seen not just as one disciple among many, but as the supreme leader. This strikes at the heart of one of Christianity's longest-running debates: authority. The Catholic Church grounds its legitimacy in the belief that Peter was the first pope, the rock upon which the Church was built. Many Protestant traditions argue the opposite, claiming Peter was simply a leader among equals. But buried beneath the mud of Peter's own hometown is a text that supports the supreme commander view. It shows that local Christians, the people who lived where Peter lived, believed he was in charge. And there's more. The inscription also identifies Peter as the key bearer. That phrase points directly to the moment when Jesus is said to have given Peter the keys to the kingdom of heaven. But the mosaic doesn't stop at that familiar verse. And this is where the story takes a truly wild turn. The team soon realized the inscription wasn't just a single block of text. It was enclosed within a medallion, a circular frame. And inside that border, barely visible, were smaller, fainter letters. They were difficult to make out, as if they had been slowly worn away by thousands of footsteps over the centuries. Or perhaps they had been carved lightly on purpose, meant to be seen only by those who knew to look. To the naked eye, the words were almost invisible. So the researchers brought in advanced imaging equipment. Infrared scanners were used to see beneath the grime and the damage left by time. When the images appeared on the screen, the entire tent fell silent. What they were seeing was a continuation of the inscription, a quote, and it was written as direct speech, words spoken by the Lord himself to his disciple. Ancient churches often display Bible verses on their walls or floors. That part wasn't unusual. But this text didn't match any known manuscript. It wasn't a standard quotation. It was different, a variation, a deviation, or possibly something even more unsettling. It could have been an earlier version, one that was later edited out. The mood at the excavation changed instantly. This was no longer just an artistic discovery. The team was staring at what appeared to be a record of a conversation that took place 2,000 years ago, just steps from where they were standing. The words were personal, intimate, and they hinted at a cosmic role, an assignment unlike anything recorded in Scripture. The scan revealed something no one expected: the preparation of heaven itself. Once the infrared scans were processed, linguists got to work. They carefully reconstructed the broken letters hidden within the faint inner ring of the mosaic. Piece by piece, a sentence emerged. It read something like this: "Guard my house, for I go to prepare the heavens." Pause on that for a moment. Guard my house. In the Gospel of John, Jesus tells Peter to feed my sheep. In Matthew, he calls him the rock on which the church will be built. But nowhere in the accepted New Testament does Jesus ever tell Peter to guard my house. And then there's the second line, "For I go to prepare the heavens." We're familiar with a similar verse, "I go to prepare a place for you," from John 14. But this wording is different, and that difference matters. It suggests a division of responsibility. Jesus is departing to prepare what comes next, while Peter is left behind as a kind of watchman over what remains. Which raises a crucial question: what exactly is the house? If it were only a metaphor for the church, the phrase wouldn't be so striking. But remember where this inscription was found. The church was built directly over a house, Peter's house. What if the ancient tradition wasn't just that Peter lived here? What if the tradition said that Jesus explicitly told him, "Stay here, protect this place. This is the anchor point"? That idea fits with something scholars call the agrapha, sayings attributed to Jesus that survive in ancient texts but never made it into the Bible. Dozens of these sayings exist. Some are strange, some are deeply moving. But finding one permanently carved into the floor of a major pilgrimage site gives it extraordinary weight. It suggests the people of Bethsaida remembered something the Gospel writers chose not to record. And the phrase, "guard my house," reshapes how we see Peter's role. It doesn't frame him as an administrator or manager. It casts him as a protector, a sentinel, someone standing watch. Defense against what? That's where the speculation begins. In early Christian belief, sacred places weren't peaceful by default. They were battlegrounds. These were locations thought to attract opposition, places where unseen forces pushed back hardest. Demons, according to early tradition, were believed to despise holy ground. So when Jesus tells Peter to guard the house, it may not have been a symbolic role at all. It may have been an assignment, one that went far beyond preaching or leadership, a spiritual duty rooted in protection. This discovery also does something else. It narrows the distance between legend and reality. It grounds the story. It turns abstract ideas, like the keys to heaven, into something physical and practical. After all, keys are meant to lock and protect a real place. In effect, the mosaic suggests that the earliest believers saw this exact location, this specific stretch of mud in Galilee, as nothing less than heaven's outpost on earth, an embassy. And Peter wasn't just a teacher there. He was the one left in charge. The ambassador told to hold the line until the master returned. But there's still another layer to this story, one that moves beyond history and into the mystical. The idea of preparing the heavens. What does that actually mean? It sounds less like a metaphor and more like construction work, as if heaven itself wasn't finished yet. It suggests that while Peter was holding the line on earth, Christ was actively shaping what came next. Building, preparing, expanding reality itself. That's a far more dynamic vision of the afterlife than what most people hear in Sunday sermons. The team understood immediately that they were dealing with something explosive. This single sentence seemed to connect earth and sky, history and theology, the physical and the divine. But as with all discoveries like this, there's an even stranger possibility. The final piece of the puzzle isn't buried in the ground. It's written in the stars. The final secret. If we take the inscription at face value, "Guard my house, for I go to prepare the heavens," we're forced to ask an uncomfortable question. Why here? Why this exact spot on the planet? Why would the preparation of the heavens require a specific physical location on Earth to be protected? There's a theory whispered among fringe scholars and unconventional theologians, those willing to look beyond standard teachings, that certain places on Earth act as anchors, points where the physical and the spiritual align. As above, so below. It's an ancient idea rooted in Hermetic thought. The material world reflects the spiritual one. But what if that idea is more literal than symbolic? What if Earth's geography isn't just land and water, but a kind of circuitry? And what if some locations function as connection nodes? If Jesus told Peter to guard the house while he went to prepare the heavens, could Bethsaida have been understood as one of those nodes? A junction point, a doorway, a bridge between realms. Look at the pattern. This wasn't an ordinary fishing village. It was the center of the impossible, the place where the blind received sight, where crowds were fed from nothing, an event that defies the laws of conservation, where Jesus walked on water, openly challenging gravity itself. Seen through a science fiction lens rather than a purely religious one, something unsettling emerges. The rules of physics seemed thinner here. The barrier between worlds felt fragile. Reality itself appeared flexible, rewritable in real time. So maybe guarding the house was never about protecting a building, or even a community. Maybe it was never about guarding a building at all. Maybe it was about guarding the breach, keeping a gateway secure. That idea lines up uncomfortably well with the Gnostic writings, the ancient esoteric texts the early church later rejected and destroyed. Many of those texts speak of guardians and gatekeepers, beings assigned to watch the thresholds between light and matter, heaven and the physical world. The mosaic discovered at El Araj may be a surviving fragment of that older, more mystical form of Christianity, a version that didn't survive intact, one that was eventually smoothed over by Rome, reshaped into a safer system of bishops and popes, while the wilder cosmic elements were buried beneath doctrine, stone, and silence. This discovery forces us to see the apostles differently, not just as teachers in robes, but as participants in something much larger, operators within a cosmic framework. Peter wasn't simply a fisherman who got promoted into leadership. He was the designated one left behind, the sentinel, the guardian entrusted with the keys, not just symbolically to a kingdom, but quite possibly to a doorway, while the master architect went to work on the other side. It suggests the ascension wasn't just a farewell, it was a departure, and someone had to stay behind to guard the threshold. Then comes the chilling detail. The church wasn't destroyed by enemies. An earthquake in the 8th century swallowed it whole, as if the earth itself sealed the secret. For over 1,000 years, Peter's house vanished, lost, unguarded, or deliberately hidden. Now it's resurfaced. The timing doesn't feel random, it feels precise. Maybe this message was never meant only for Peter. Maybe it was a time capsule for us. Guard the house, protect the foundation, watch the breach. The site is covered again, but the words are out. They can't be unread. The signal has been sent. So here's the question. If Jesus gave Peter instructions that never made it into the Bible, what else are we missing? Or is this just a beautiful flaw? Tell us what you think, and if you want more buried history, like and subscribe.